Wednesday of the 21st week in Ordinary Time.
A reading from the first letter of St. Paul to the Thessalonians. You recall, brothers and sisters, our toil and drudgery, working night and day in order not to burden any of you. We proclaim to you the gospel of God. You are witnesses, and so is God, how devoutly and justly and blamelessly we behaved toward you believers. As you know, we treated each one of you as a father treats his children, exhorting and encouraging you and insisting that you walk in a manner worthy of the God who calls you into his kingdom and glory. And for this reason, we too give thanks to God unceasingly. That in receiving the word of God from hearing us, you received it not as the word of men, but as it truly is, the word of God, which is now at work in you who believe. The word of the Lord.
The responsorial psalm. The response is, You have searched me, and you know me, Lord. Where can I go from your spirit? From your presence, where can I flee? If I go up to the heavens, you are there. If I sink to the netherworld, you are present there. You have searched me, and you know me, Lord. If I take the wings of the dawn, if I settle at the farthest limits of the sea, even there your hand shall guide me, and your right hand hold me fast. You have searched me, and you know me, Lord. If I say, Surely the darkness shall hide me, and night shall be my light, for you darkness itself is not dark, and night shines as the day. You have searched me, and you know me, Lord.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. Jesus said, Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You are like whitewashed tombs, which appear beautiful on the outside, but inside are full of dead men's bones and every kind of filth. Even so, on the outside you appear righteous, but inside you are filled with hypocrisy and evildoing. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You build the tombs of prophets and adorn the memorials of the righteous, and you say, If we had lived in the days of our ancestors, we would not have joined them in shedding the prophets' blood. Thus, you bear witness against yourselves that you are the children of those who murdered the prophets. Now fill up what your ancestors measured out. The Gospel of the Lord.
The first reading comes from 1 Thessalonians chapter 2, verses 9 to 13. Yesterday we heard the beginning of a defense concerning Paul's ministry, in which he showed that he didn't seek their favor, he didn't want flattery, rather he served them with generosity. And that defense continues when Paul speaks about his work, that he didn't want to be a burden on them, he didn't ask them for any sustenance, but rather he worked hard night and day so that he wouldn't be a burden. Now that's typical Pauline exaggeration, I work night and day. Paul very often uses phrases like this, I pray for you night and day without ceasing. This is typical Jewish exaggeration of the first century. Jesus uses a similar technique at times. You have to hate your parents in order to follow me. A little bit bigger than life. Well, Paul earned a living as a tent maker. And tent maker probably doesn't mean making pup tents, but rather it means making the awnings that would be used in the marketplace. Those awnings, by the way, were called stoa, which gives us the name for that group of philosophers called the Stoics, because they tended to preach in the marketplace. Paul is also receiving sustenance from the Philippians, and later on in his letter to the Philippians, he thanks them for their generosity, something he doesn't mention in this letter. Paul speaks about how he treated everyone fairly, encouraging them, appealing to them, and admonishing them like a father. Remember, yesterday we heard how he treated them like a mother, with gentleness and kindness. Today we have the balance that he treats them also as a father, correcting them when they're in the wrong, making sure he's telling them what they need to hear in order to grow in the faith. The Gospel is from Matthew 23, 27 to 32. Paul speaks about how the Pharisees and the scribes are like whitewashed tombs. Now, the Jewish people have an abhorrence for tombs. They would be very, very careful not to build their buildings upon them because they were seen as unclean places. If you touched a dead body, you would be unclean for a while. And so to call them unclean tombs is to call them places of dishonor, places of filth. He also says that they build monuments for the prophets, but their ancestors were the very ones who murdered the prophets. So in a sense, they're just playing a game. They don't really want to listen to what the prophets say. They just want to show external honor to the prophets while ignoring what their prophetic message was. And so in this passage we see a continuation of that idea that the Pharisees and scribes are just hypocrites. They have external observance, but not interior conversion. Remember, this gospel was written at a time when the community was being attacked, and they were being attacked by the Pharisees. The Pharisees were excluding Jewish Christians from the synagogue, calling them heretics, at times even putting them to death. And so there seems to be a real antagonism in the phrasing of this gospel, that the author goes out of his way to remember every negative saying that Jesus had against the Pharisees and scribes, and he includes it in the text. It's odd, this is the gospel where Jesus says you should love your enemies, pray for those who persecute you. But even Matthew doesn't seem to be able to do that. He's taken over by some of his rage at what is happening to his fellow Christians. And that's a bit of a consolation, because it reminds us that no matter how good the intentions are, we often fall short in our following of the Christian message. And may God bless us.